everybody, today is part 2 of our Let It Snow pillow video series. We're going to be working on the snowman today. The snowman is made in 3 separate blocks. The arms are done later, but we're going to focus just on the snowman today. In addition to our regular threads today, we're going to be using a water-soluble thread in our bobbin. This is what I'll be using. I used this on my polar bear rice warmer to create the fringe on the scarf, and it worked great. All 3 parts of the snowman can fit into a 6x10 hoop. I don't have a 6x10 hoop. I'll be using an 8x12 hoop. And I'm going to be trying a few fun things today to see if I can turn Snowman into a fancy looking snow lady. I have all my fabrics cut. I'll be using white flannel for my snowman. Let's go over our batting sizes. For part A, your batting needs to be 7.5 by 9.5. Part B, 5.5 by 9.5. And part C, 5.5 by 9.5. You might see some yarn in here with my Snowman A. Here's the first thing we're going to do to try to make Snowman A look like Snow Lady A. I made pigtails. It's 6 strands of yarn, so when you do the braid, 2 strands per piece as you're doing your braid. These are about 3 inches long. The yarn came from a Kimberbell punch needle kit. It's just a pink yarn I had left over. I've got it tied at the top and tied at the bottom. I know how I want to attach these. I'm hoping it will work. I also have some fluffy chenille yarn and some purple tulle. That's the brand of tulle. I found it on Amazon. I think it was $3.99. I thought of this yesterday and got it delivered today. The chenille yarn I ordered quite a while ago. I use this for cross stitch finishing. I also ordered this on Amazon. We have no craft stores near us. There's nowhere to shop locally for this. I have to drive into town if I want to do that, so I order a lot of stuff. I'm hoping to use the tulle to make a little skirt. I have an idea how to do this, but I've never done that before. We'll see if it works. And for the yarn, I'm thinking my snowman needs a little scarf. Let's get started with Snowman Part A. I already have my light mesh cutaway loaded in my hoop. Let's head over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB, and I am doing the background quilting. There are some special instructions for this block. We'll go ahead and go over that, but we're going to start by loading our background quilting. KDQ 491 Winter 11 6x8. And then we're going to add our snowman. And if you haven't done this before, please refer to part 1. I go through it a little bit slower. As we progress through the videos, anything that's repetitive, I'll do faster. Otherwise, the videos can get boring. Here's my snowman. I'm going to hit set. This block has some special instructions. When you add the snowman head, it centers on the background quilting. If you go to page 16, it tells us we need to align the right side of the block file, so that's the snowman, with the right side of the quilting file. There's a close-up here showing what it looks like after you move it. What that's doing, we're going to go to the top of the page here, is fixing the block so when you sew the snowman head to the next part, the little neck will disappear. If you don't move it and you leave it centered, you'll just have a little neck on your snowman. So if you like that, you can leave it that way. I'm going to go ahead and try to move this. We'll see if I do it correctly. I've never done that before. So you can watch what I do. We'll see how it turns out. If you're not doing background quilting, you need to look at steps 1 and 2. There's some steps here telling you how to fold your fabric, and this goes on the next page. This will help you line up your fabric so you get your block sewn in correctly, but we're doing the background quilting. So we're going to adjust this file, and then when the background quilting is done, we start on step 3, so we won't be going through these steps. I need to move my file according to the instructions. Rather than try and drag and drop, I'm going to use the edit and the arrows. So we're going to hit edit and move. And I'm going to use these arrows. I need to align the right side of my block file with the right side of the quilting file. I'm going to use the arrows. Whoops! Let's move that back a little bit. Went too far. There. I can tell they're right on top of each other. So I'm looking at that, and I can see the quilting file is lined up right where the straight part starts to curve. If you look in your instructions, there's a close-up picture here. See the orange line? Right there. So straight and then curve, that's where that line lands. You can see I've got one outside line and one inside line. This space between those 2 lines is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So when we sew this block to the next block, that part is going to disappear, meaning that little straight part, the little snowman neck, is going to go away and disappear into our seam allowance. Going to hit OK. I'm saving this to my machine in case anything happens. I don't want to have to try and line that up again. He's now all set, all moved over, all lined up, ready to go. Let's hit embroidery. We're going to go through some things that we've done before, so I'll move through those to music. We've got our batting placement, batting tack down, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and the background quilting. I'm going to be using the same color for background quilting that I used in part 1. Right now I have a neutral thread on my machine for all the placement and tack downs. I'll switch to this for the quilting. All of that's going to be set to music, and then we're going to work through the snowman together. Going to do everything up through the background quilting to music. Background quilting is done. I'm going to switch to white. We're going to stitch out the placement line for the snowman head fabric. You'll see on your screen you've got this straight line with the little tick mark. That's for the people who are doing this without background quilting. We need to go forward to get to our snowman head placement line. That's step number 3 in the instructions. So you need to skip the little line, skip this box. Now we're ready. I have my white thread on my machine, going to stitch out that snowman head placement line. The placement line's a little hard to see. I need to make sure I get that covered with my white flannel, and the edge of it is right there with the edge of the block. I do want to tape this down, and then I'm going to lift it up and double check. Looks good, everything's covered. The next thing we're going to stitch is the tack down. Once the tack down is stitched, trim everything that's outside that line. You can also see right here, here's our trimming line, and it's lined up perfectly with our tack down line here for the snowman head. This right here is 1/4 inch, so this is lined up correctly. When we go to sew this into our next block with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, the little neck is going to disappear. So the snowman head will curve like that, and the next block will curve around. We're leaving the white thread on, or if you're doing your hat in really dark colors, you can switch to another color. I'm going to leave the white on. We're going to stitch out the placement line for hat part number 1. This is my hat number 1 fabric. I need to make sure I cover that placement line. I'm going to use a little piece of tape here to make sure this stays in place, and I always like to double check. We're going to stitch the tack down and then trim everything outside the tack down line. I've got my hat fabric number 1 all trimmed. This is fairy frost fabric. I talked about this in part 1. I'll link all my fabric information below. We're going to stitch the outline for hat fabric number 2. Same thing, you want to cover that placement line with hat fabric number 2, stitch the tack down and trim. We're on placement for hat fabric number 3. Place your fabric number 3 and then stitch out the tack down and trim. When we get the hat fabric number 4, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to stitch out my placement line for hat piece number 4. I just stitched out the placement line for piece number 4. I'm going to turn this towards me. I want to place the little braids that I have. I want them to look like they're popping out from underneath the hat. I need to decide how to place these because I need them to get caught with the line that's going to tack down the fabric. Now I need to be careful because I don't want to put them too close together because we're going to stitch eyes, nose, mouth, and little cheeks, and I will have to tape them out of the way for that. But I want them to get caught under the hat so it looks like the hair's coming out from underneath the hat. I'm referring back to the picture, and you can also see the line right here. I think what I'm going to do is right here where the snowman curves up, there's a little point right there. I think I'm going to center this over the point. I've got a knot. That's where I've tied off my yarn, and I'm going to put the knot just inside of that because I don't want my machine to have to stitch over that knot. Now you can see there's an awful lot of extra yarn here. I probably need to trim some of that away. Now keep in mind I'm doing this on the fly as I go. What I think I'm going to do is tape this down like that, and I'm going to trim and tape down the next one in the same place. Then I'm going to go back to my machine. I'm going to back it up and I'm going to stitch this same placement line again, because if I don't, if I move right on to the tack down and I lay my fabric over this and tack it down, the tape's going to be stuck under the fabric. So I'll use the placement line again as a way to tack down the braids for my snowman. You can see I'm kind of angling them out so they'll go out after they're tacked down. You could tape them so they go, you know, straight, but you can see that you'll be able to play with the yarn. Let's go back to the machine and I'm going to show you how to back it up one step in case you want to do this. Here we are at the machine. It's set to do the fabric tack down. I'm going to back it up, needle minus plus. I'm going to go up one step. That's technically the fabric placement line again. I'm going to use this to tack down the braids. You could also run this back and forth under your sewing machine, but I'm trying to do as much as I can on the embroidery machine. I've added extra tape to hold this down. I know it might be kind of hard to pick out when it's done. And I'm going to slow down my machine as it goes over the yarn to make sure it doesn't get caught, because there's some bulk there with the yarn. Let's go ahead and start. We're back over at the table. It's stitched over the braids. I want to take this tape off because I don't want to have the tape caught underneath the hat fabric. I just need to be really careful because the tape is really sticky. I don't want to ruin my yarn or pull out the stitches. I got the tape off. I did have to use the tweezers, and I'm just getting a good look at where the yarn is. I want to try and make sure it kind of all stays in the center. So remember, that's our placement line for fabric 4. Here's my fabric 4. Add some tape, and I need to stitch the tack down. I'm going to do the same thing where I slow it down as it's bumping over the braids because it has that extra bulk. I added 2 more pieces of tape. One here, one here. It's really hard to get the tape off the flannel. You have to be really careful. We're going to stitch the tack down. It'll go around twice, so I'm going to keep my finger on my start stop button up here and slow it down as it's going over the braids. Everything tacked down okay. If you're doing this, I definitely recommend doing that kind of start and stop motion. It really helped transition it up and over the extra bulk without too much trouble. I'm taking off my tape, and then I need to trim everything that's outside of that stitch line. In case you're doing the braids, when you go to trim this, be really careful. Pick it up, pull it back. I'm using snips. Put my scissors down and double check. Don't cut off the braid. You just spent all that time adding that yarn. You want to make sure that you don't accidentally cut that yarn out. So check underneath, make sure your scissors are positioned on top of the yarn, and then you can do your trimming. The next thing we're going to stitch is the snowman head satin outlines. They're going on the sides. That stitched out fine, no problems. It ended right there, so I didn't have any trouble with the braids. You can see they're going to be in the way for the next step, so I just need to get them out of the way and tape them down. I'm very lightly taping these because the tape does stick to the yarn, so you can push it down against, you know, the fabric, but don't press it down really hard against the yarn. It'll get caught. We're going to stitch a series of satin outlines. We're going to work our way down the hat. We're going to do satin outlines 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here's the colors I have. This will be for part 1. And all my thread brand information will be below. Part 2, I'm using Sim thread and Floriani threads. Part 3, in case you've never heard of Sim thread, that's this little guy. You can get them on Amazon. There's also something called New Bro thread. This is part 4. I've used both. I tend to use the Sim thread more often. You can buy a box of a whole bunch of colors for a reasonable price. So if you're new to embroidery, this is great thread, at least on my baby lock machine. I've used it on a Pathfinder. I've used it on this Meridian. I have no trouble with it. I'm going to run all 4 parts together. It's just satin stitching. I've got the satin stitching done for parts 1, 2, and 3. We're getting ready to do the satin stitching here, and it's going to run over the yarn. And I've been sitting here watching this part, thinking about how can I protect the yarn. Finally, a light bulb went on. I have some of this Kimberbell Wash Away embroidery topping. If you've never used it before, it's kind of like saran wrap, and it does wash away. I'm going to tape some right where the braid connects to the hat. That way, when it goes around and it stitches the satin stitching, it shouldn't get caught in the yarn. It'll protect that yarn. And this does wash away. All you have to do is spray and it comes off. And actually, it's really easy to peel off too. So I'm going to tape these 2 pieces of wash away topping down. I've got that taped down. I added a piece here and here. I didn't tape here because I don't want to add tape on top of the flannel. I'm still going to sit here and keep an eye on my machine. If you've never used wash away topping before, it doesn't matter if it's crinkly or if there's wrinkles. You don't have to smooth it out. You're going to pull it off and wash it off anyway. Let's see how this works. This worked out great. We're going to take this off the machine. I'm going to peel some of this stuff away before we do the pom-pom. Very pleased with the way this turned out. I think that probably saved the satin stitching going over the yarn. It eliminated any problems with the stitch out. To remove the wash away, you can see that it actually tears away really easily. I probably won't even have to wash any of this away. Now, having done that, I had a thought that if you want, you could even put like a little yarn fringe underneath. You could make bangs for your snowman, and then I would put the wash away down just like I did before the satin stitching. Let's get the rest of this off. And then you're going to need your water soluble thread. You want to wind a bobbin with water soluble thread because we're going to make the pom-pom on the hat and we're going to create fringe. We need to change to our water soluble thread in the bobbin. We're going to be switching bobbins back and forth, back and forth. I've marked my water-soluble bobbin with that W because it looks just like the white thread. And then we're going to be working on the pom-pom on the hat. I'm going to open this. This is a variegated thread. I wish I had a rainbow one. You know those hats that have the big pom-poms and they're all rainbow colored, but I don't. So that's the color on this one. This is another sim thread. My water-soluble bobbin is in. If you don't have water-soluble thread, it says you can use a visible color. We're going to be dissolving the thread, or if you have visible thread, you'll do some trimming. Variegated thread is on the machine. We're going to stitch the Pom Pom Fringe 1. That came out really interesting. It's striped. Can you see that? It goes pink, white, pink, white, pink, white. We need to change back to your regular thread in your bobbin, and it's going to stitch pom-pom tack down line. Regular bobbin thread, we're going to stitch the tack down. Switch back to your water-soluble thread, and we're going to stitch fringe number 2. We need to change our bobbin again, put your regular bobbin back in, and we're going to stitch the pom-pom fringe 2 tack down. We'll be dissolving the bobbin thread later. We're going to move on and stitch out the cheeks. I'm going to use pale pink for that. After the cheeks, we're going to stitch out the carrot nose. I pulled an orange. And after the nose, we stitch the eyes and the mouth, and then we're going to dissolve the water-soluble bobbin. I'll go ahead and run all these together with music. All this is straight stitching. We're all stitched out. We're going to take this over to the table and we're going to create the fringe. I've got a spray bottle with water and a couple of big cotton swabs. It says to turn your hoop to the back, remove the pom-pom fringe bobbin thread. If water-soluble thread was used, which is what I used, spray the fringe stitches with water. We'll dissolve the bobbin thread. Once you spray it and get it wet, you use a cotton swab and you go like this, and that'll help dissolve the bobbin thread. If you used a visible thread, you're going to need to get snips or a seam ripper and clip the visible thread from step 18, but do not clip any neutral colored bobbin thread. I'm going to spray this, get it wet. You just go like this. And you should start seeing some thread loops. If you don't, you need to add more water. Oh, I'm rubbing the wrong part. Rub the outside part. I'm rubbing the part where we use the regular bobbin thread to do the tack downs. That would be why nothing's happening. There we go. You can see the part like right here is dissolving, and here. Here's what that looks like so far. I'll know if I didn't dissolve it all because we're going to flip it to the front and start pulling the loops out. Go ahead and turn your hoop to the front It says working outward from the center. Use tweezers to carefully lift the fringe stitches up and away from the tack down stitches. This will form the fringe. Slide underneath and lift. Okay, they're going to lift toward the center. Yeah, I don't think I have enough water on some of this because they're not pulling out. I've got everything pulled loose. If you sort of crowd it all to the center, you'll have a nice clean line all the way around. That's how you know you removed everything. You can kind of fluff it. It's wet at this point, and remember we've got this center piece here that's actually tacked down. So if you want to fluff it out so you can kind of see that center sort of looks like a flower, you can do that. I'm going to take this out of the hoop, set it aside, reload with stabilizer. I'll be using this 8x12 hoop throughout. We have to do parts B and C. One thing I'm going to do now, so I don't forget, is tape these out of the way because we're going to trim the block later. I don't want to accidentally cut them off. We're going to stitch Snowman Part B, which is the middle. We need KDQ 491, Winter 11, 4x8. Winter 11, 4x8, right down there. And then I'm going to add Part B. Part B is the middle section. There's 2 buttons. We don't have to do anything with this as far as moving the block. It says center the block file with the quilting file. Mine imports as centered, so this is ready to go. We're going to do all of our background quilting and use this up through the background quilting, and then you'll switch to white and we'll do our placement and tack down for the snowman body. We'll trim it, we'll do the satin stitching, and we'll add the buttons. This one's going to go really quickly. I went ahead and put my silver thread on the machine. I'm going to go all the way through the background quilting, same steps we've been doing. You want to switch to white thread. We're going to stitch out the outline for our fabric placement for the snowman middle, then place the fabric, tack it down, trim it, and do the satin outline. These are all things we've done before, so I'll go ahead and run it all together. Next we're going to stitch out 2 buttons. I'm going to do one with the dark pink, and then I'm going to do one with the purple. And then the last step is stitching out some trimming guides and tick marks. It says to do that on a visible thread. I'll just do that in the purple. I'll go ahead and run button 1, button 2, and the tick marks all together. This part is done. One thing I noticed, since I'm using flannel and it's a bit fuzzy, I do see a little bit of the white coming through, again because it's fuzzy and it's textured. If that's going to bother you, if you're using something fluffy or fuzzy, before you stitch down these buttons, you can put down that wash away topping that I used with the hair braids, and that'll help keep everything flat. I'm going to take this over to my table, get it out of the hoop, re-hoop my stabilizer, same size hoop, and we're going to stitch out part C. We're on part C. We need to load KDQ 491 Winter 11 4x8. And then after we do that, we'll load part C of our snowman. That's the bottom part. You don't need to adjust anything for this. I've got my silver thread on my machine. I'll go ahead and move all the way through the background quilting. Once your background quilting is done, it says to switch to white. It's going to stitch out some trimming guides here, here, and here. And then after that, we're going to do the placement line, place the fabric, tack it down, trim, and stitch the last button. I'll go ahead and run that all together. The only thing that's different is what's going to stitch out right now, which are those trimming guides. We're all done with this block. I'm going to take it out of the hoop. We're going to head over to the table. We'll trim all of our blocks, and then we'll see if I'm able to add a scarf and a skirt. Going to trim our blocks. I have an OmniGrid rotating cutting mat. I'll put links to cutting mats below. Kimberbell has a nice square one that works really well with their orange pop rulers. I just happen to have a round one. I've had it for a while. For Snowman block or Snowlady block, we're going to trim to 6.5 by 8.5. I've got the 6.5 by 8.5 size here. You line it up along the trimming lines. We did this in the previous video, so if you need to see it a little slower or an explanation of the orange pop rulers, you can watch part 1. I'm going to get this lined up, get my next ruler on the outside for my hand, grab my little paperweight, and do the trimming. We've got block A done. I'm going to set this part aside. Blocks B and C use a combination of ruler sizes, so we're going to work through those together. Here is block B. We want to trim to 4.5 by 8.5. We're going to use a combination of 2 rulers. We're going to start with the 6.5 by 8.5. It says to center the trimming guides and the tick marks with the inner edges of the ruler. Orange pop rulers have some markings. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little arrow, and there's one here at the bottom. There we go. See the little arrow there? We're lining up the arrows so they point toward those lines. Wow, that's hard to see. Time to break out the glasses again, folks. Now we're going to nest a 4.5 by 6.5, so the smaller ruler inside the larger ruler. Setting that inside, and actually there's a line here. Can you hear that? And there's a line here. You can make sure that that's right on top of that tick mark, and that way you know everything's lined up. Okay, I have everything where it needs to go. Now I just have to prevent it from moving. You want to look at the instructions. What it's calling left and right, I would actually call top and bottom, because it's like the top of the snowman and the bottom of the snowman. But it's calling it left and right. So if you're standing here in front of your project, left and right. Technically I have mine upside down. There we go. So button number 1 is on my left, button number 2 is on my right. I have everything lined up. Cut the left and the right sides. So left side, right side. So the button sides. Cut the button sides, shown in red. Don't cut the other sides. So you're basically cutting the neck and the waist. Once you've cut the neck and the waist, you're going to take off this ruler, and then we're going to cut, they're calling it top and bottom, again because you're where you're standing, but you're going to cut the sides that aren't cut. You're going to cut the part that has this line and the tick line, and then there will be part, oh look, I'm cutting on the wrong side. I want to cut on this side. Actually, I'm just going to take this off at this point, and I'm going to grab a regular ruler, because what's going to happen, we're going to cut here, and we're going to cut here, and then you can see there's a little part that's not cut. We're going to need a regular ruler anyway. So I'm going to line this up straight. You can use a line on your ruler and line it up with that tick mark and overlap it, and the line disappears. There. And I'll do the same thing here. I'm just going to pick a line on my ruler, line everything up, cut that, and then see how we've got leftover bits that have to be cut. So use a regular ruler and cut those. You can use scissors if you want. I like to use a ruler. And then cut the other two. I still think it's a little crooked, even though I use a ruler. That's alright. Remember, this is a pillow, so if anything's a little bit crooked, you're never going to know. There we go. We can double check. This should be 4.5 by 8.5. 4.5 tall. Yep. 8.5 wide. I'm going to set this aside. We'll go to part C. Here's the instructions for part C. The same way we just did the last block. It ends up at 4.5 by 8.5. I'll cut this one with a regular ruler. That way, if you don't have orange pop rulers, we can work through this one together. Let me get part C, and I'll show you a couple of different ways you can cut that. One of my favorite ways is to use rulers that fit. I did that last time. I have an 8.5 inch wide ruler, but let's say you don't. All you have is one ruler and you have a straight ruler. That's fine too. Now, if you remember, this one had some placement lines. Wow, I can't even see them, honestly. They were stitched in white. I'm going to start with the bottom and the sides because the top has this little bit extra and it's going to be a little bit bumpy. When I work with a regular ruler, this is my first cut, I can pick a random line on the ruler and line it up with this stitch line so I know that's straight, and then line up the side of the ruler right along this stitch line here. Going to double check because I just moved my ruler. Get that right there and right up top, and that looks pretty straight. I'm going to do the sides. 4.5, 8.5. Hey, I did pretty good. We're going to go forward. I'm on page 35. I want to put this together today. So part A, B, C, and you can see later we'll add this row. So we're okay stitching together part A, B, and C today. Here's all the parts. We're going to start with A and B. I'm going to line them up and just have a look. Now, if I line up this outside line, you can see these don't match. Let me zoom in. Do you see I'm a little off? So I want to line up based on the stitching, not the outside edges of my fabric. That looks good. Let me grab some pins and fold it over. I guess you can kind of pick it up and look at it. You can sort of see here that it's matching. I don't know if I can get a pin through that. I'm going to grab some clips. I'm going to clip right on top of that. And then let's look here. And I'm going to clip right on top of that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch here and here. Then I'll bring it back, we'll open it, and we'll see if they match. If they don't, then all I have to pick out is here and here. If I go from end to end and these don't match, I've got to rip all of that out. You want to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is probably going to be right on these stitching lines. That's what I'm going to use for my guide. The line right here, or the line right here. It's probably easier to see on this side. And I'm going to stitch right on top of that line because that should make these match. Alright, I stitched right there and right there. That's all I've stitched so far. Just trying to make sure I match my pieces. That looks really good. It's not perfect though. Let me show you. This side, pretty good. This side, do you see the little snowman neck right there? That means I didn't get this side quite lined up correctly. And since I just did a couple of stitches, really easy to take out. Now I can line up again. This is one of those how picky do you want to be things. I will try something 3 times. If by the 3rd try I don't get it, I leave it. Let's check attempt number 2. That's better. That matched up better. No weird straight part. So these 2 pieces are tacked down. I just need to go attach the rest of it together. So I'll sew the straight 1/4 inch seam. I've got that seam sewn. That looks great. And I am hoping to add a scarf, so even if it was a little off, it really wouldn't have mattered. I'm going to do the same thing for part B and C. Line them up. You can actually just put them together and then look at the stitching and line up the stitching and then clip them, and then I'll sew and I'll see if I get them in the right spot. If not, I'll do it again and sew. And then we'll see how that turns out. Let's see how that turned out. Looks good. This one is off, gosh, just barely. I'm just going to pull it and push it. Now it looks good. I need to press my seams open. I've got this pressed open. Let's talk about a scarf and a skirt. Now, I thought about sewing the scarf in the seam when I attached these 2 blocks, but I was afraid it might not look good, so I went ahead and sewed the whole block together. I've got a couple colors of yarn here. The red's probably too red. Gray and pink might work. And I can knit and crochet, but it's been so long I don't even remember how to cast on, so I'm going to see what I can do with some yarn without knitting or crocheting. I'm going to twist a bunch of it together and see what I can come up with. I'm going to tie 3 ends together. I already just started twisting it. So I'm going to make myself a nice long twist. And what I'm thinking of doing is attaching 2 ends and then kind of cutting it and tying it like it was a scarf and fluffing it. We're going to try the new glue gun today. If you watched my video on the Hoop Studio putting together the gift card holders, I actually burned my felt, so I ordered this Cool Shot glue gun. I'm going to plug this in. I've got a big twist of yarn. This is 20 inches. You do not need that much. I cut the ends really close to the knot because what I want to do is try to glue the knot right on the seam or right next to the seam so it disappears. This stuff is like, it's actually fuzzing all over. This may end up being a bad idea, but let's do it anyway. This is a hot glue gun, but it's not screaming hot. My other Surebonder is a high temperature glue gun. I'm going to put a little glue right here. And I'm just going to set this right here. Normally I work with silicone finger covers. You don't really need them for this. You can still burn yourself on that though. It's not, you know, they call it Cool Shot. It's not cold glue. The glue does melt. It's on there really good. I'm putting it right in the seam. A bit of an audio glitch, just adding the glue to that seam and then pressing down the corner of the yarn, just like before, like I did on the other side. So right now she's got a really long necklace. What I need to do is decide how I want to do this. I think I want to tie it like a scarf, you know, tie a nice little bow or something. So I'm going to need to cut this in half. I'm going to cut it and I'm going to knot both ends so the twist doesn't come undone. I've got that knotted and I'm going to tie this just kind of like it was a scarf. Tie it around the neck, decide how far up I want that. I'm going to go ahead and glue that. That looks really cute. Looks good right there. Add some glue. Push that down. It doesn't have to be tight, it can be kind of loose like a scarf. I don't think I want it quite that long. Knot it again, you know, maybe about here, maybe between the 2 buttons. So there's the scarf. I actually love it. That came out great. It looks really cute. If you like the way this looks and you do this with yarn, or you could actually make a little miniature scarf, you can tuck it in between part A and part B before you stitch the seam, and then you really don't have to worry about lining up the top and bottom. Now let's think about a skirt. I bought this tulle. It was really cheap, and I thought I'd try and make, you know, a little skirt. So that's going to involve gathering and trying to make it look good. I'll probably have to do a little bit of hand stitching. And you can always do this if you're thinking about doing something before you actually go through with it. Well, maybe except for dyeing your hair. You never know. You can sort of lay it out and look at it and see if you like the way it looks. That's really cute. I'm going to go ahead and go for it. This is 6 inches wide and I cut off a 46-inch piece. What I'm going to do is take my purple embroidery thread and I'm going to go along the top edge and I'm going to just kind of go up and down and up and down. A nice long stitch. The purpose of that will be just to pull it and to gather the tulle. If you've got a Kimberbell punch needle kit, they very handily come with a needle threader and a needle. Grab one of the needles. I'm going to thread my needle. I've double folded the thread. I pulled off about 1 yard and then I folded it in half. Put your needle threader through the eye of the needle and then you can put your thread through the needle threader like that in case you've never used one before. Pull that through. These are the 2 ends and then I have the fold here. It's kind of a cross stitch thing. I'm just going to go up and down really quick right here at the start, and then I'm going to run my needle through this loop. It's my loop of thread. That way I don't have to try to tie a knot and have a knot stick to the tulle. That's going to anchor my thread, and then all I'm going to do, I have to do the length of the tulle close to the top. You can try to be consistent and just kind of go back and forth, because what we're going to do is we're going to pull the thread when we get to the end and gather it. So I'm going to go all the way down the length of this tulle. I reached the end. My needle just pulled off, but that's okay. I'm going to set that aside. Just pull your thread. That's pulling it all the way. I'm gathering it all the way to the center, which is a little too tight. We want to have a little room to attach this, and you have to figure out where you want to put it, and then figure out where I need to tie off my thread. Right there. And then I'm just going to move that out of the way. Tie several knots because the tulle has pretty big holes. I don't want my thread to slip out. And I'm going to put a clip here so it won't slip off. I'm going to find the end, and we're just going to hot glue it right there. Just a little bit. This Cool Shot glue gun says you can use it with things like paper and lace. It is warm. You probably should have one of those finger covers. I'm not going to burn my finger, but it's a little toasty. And then we're going to glue this end. So I'll just slide everything. Find where the end is. Right here. I've got my knot right there. Put that right there. Right where the little waistline is. Push that down. Get the glue off my fingers. And we'll trim this thread. I may need to add a little bit more glue, but now you've got both ends. So what you can do is get it arranged, and I'm going to add just a touch of glue to the center. So I've got a little bit of glue right there, and now I can fluff. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. It might be a little over the top for some of you, but I just wanted to try it and see how it would look. Let's undo her pigtails. Let's untape the pigtails. Oh my goodness. It's just so silly. I love it. Wow. She's like high maintenance snow lady. We got our scarf, our puffy hat up here, our nice hair, chenille scarf. Look at that. Let me turn it the right way and see if I can get it all on camera. It just about fits on camera. There you go. My super fancy, ready for a night out on the town snow lady. She's ready to party. What can I say? I love it. It's different. You do not have to do any of this. I just wanted to try something different. And actually, as I'm playing with this, you can make a Hawaiian one. Hawaiian fabrics. Give it a grass skirt. If you've got children or grandchildren, maybe they're on a cheerleading team or something, you could put a little skirt on it, like a little cheerleader skirt. There's all sorts of fun stuff you could do with it. I hope you've enjoyed part 2, making my super feminine snow lady with me. That was a lot of fun. Let's look at what we're going to do next time for part 3. For the next video, we're going to work on the pieced blocks, the snowballs, we've got a couple of pinwheels, and then we're going to make the arms and the lace snowflake. I've never done lace work before. This is going to be a first for me. I don't even know the materials we need for that. Let's peek at that and make sure we have what we need. To make the 3D snowflakes, you want to get some wash away stabilizer. Here's what that looks like. Wash away. This is just the straight wash away. It's not the topping. It's not the sticky back, it's just wash away. I will go ahead and link that in the description box below. And it does talk about matching your bobbin thread to your top thread. I use a white bobbin thread and I'll be using a white top thread, so I won't be changing my bobbin when we get to that. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below the video. Let me know what you think of my kind of crazy over-the-top snow lady. I had a lot of fun putting this together. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. I have a new Facebook group. It's below in the description box. Would love to have you join. We share all of our crafts, machine embroidery, cross stitch, quilting, whatever you're working on. We'll have parts 3 and 4, and then our Let It Snow pillow will be complete. I'm trying to post them every other day. I think I'm going to run into the Christmas holiday, so part 4 may end up being every other day. I'll try and stick to the schedule if I can. After this, we're going to be working on the snow place tiling scene from the Feeling Festive Bella box. And then coming in January, we'll be working on Sweetheart Street. I'm going to set that up as a quilt along. I'll post a schedule and give more details for that. And throughout next year, I'll be working on Perfectly Pieced, Hoop Studio, and the new Applique of the Month Club. I hope you liked making the snowman or snow lady block with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!